He's spent a week and a half in Louise and then moved from there. Now he's in Florida. They're in the cold.
Your son a diver too?
He's a diver, but he's not diving right now. No, this
Well, why
He's-
believe if you're not gonna scuba dive?
because he's a photographer.
Just
and
do y'all
he's
set?
doing the job.
Oh, okay.
So
Well, we're gonna go ahead and get started. It's a couple minutes after 4. As I always like to do, I'd like to thank everyone that is in attendance for being here today. Our
Right.
subcommittee of city council members, our consultant team, as well as the rest of the Department of Planning and Parks. So just to all of you, thanks again. And with that, we do roll call on this.
Absolutely. Councilmember Clark. Councilmember Dodwell,
here,
Councilmember Rambo.
Here.
All right, you have quorum.
Thank you all again. The department would appreciate if there is a motion and second to act upon the minutes from our last meeting, November 21, 2023.
Okay, sure.
Approved by Dr. Randall. Is there a second? Seconded by Councilmember Dodwell. Changes, additions? Yes, ma'am.
On the, under number 13 on the minutes, it says that our next meeting is in November 12th. And, a question on it, since we don't have a chair and a vice chair, who signs the approval of this? I mean, we don't have on the minutes a place for them to be signed. How does that work?
We reflect the vote that's taken by the subcommittee members. And as you'll recall at the first meeting, I did ask if the subcommittee wanted a chair and vice chair, and it kind of was just do it. So we just put the vote after the action of the subcommittee. That's not acceptable. The department's open to other.
I'm fine.
I just didn't know if it needed.
I'm sure if it was something a little more formalized, but. And as you know, the department provides updates on the subcommittee to city council at each of its meetings so that they're aware of the progress we're making and what's being discussed. So hopefully that's sufficient. With the one change made to the month or any others, otherwise all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed, any abstain? Thank you very much. Any public comments? So. See none. One of the first items on tonight's agenda is the mural board. Obviously, you've all had an opportunity to work with it since our last meeting. And I think Ms. Landoni and I just thought if there are any comments or questions regarding it, we'd like to maybe hear them now. If there's any assistance you need to better utilize the tool, that as well. So Ms. Landoni, if I could call upon you.
Yes. Hello, everyone. Good afternoon. Yeah, so I think that as you know, and I apologize if sometimes I say first names. I'm gonna try to get in the habit of referring to everyone by last name, but it's my habit sometimes to go with first name. So, but as Mr. Volnik was suggesting, first we wanted, it seems like everyone had a chance to work on the Miro board. And so that gives me the hint that everyone is comfortable using it. And there were some good questions about how we're gonna be moving forward with progress for our work. So we'll touch on some of those things today during the conversation. But before I move forward into today's agenda, are there any questions or any other points that you would like to bring up about Miro?
Ms. Landoni, I have a question, and it's probably to Ms. DeGuire as well. Is that something do you purchase that, or is it something that is on a monthly basis, or? It's really a good tool.
Mhm.
So there is a free version and then there's a purchased version. We have the purchased version and I think you have the option to pay annually or monthly. The reason why we pay it is so that we can share it with our clients. So if you want to give access to, if I wanted to just have the DG2 team internally sharing boards, then right, Maria, I don't think it costs any money unless we want to share with clients.
That is correct. Yes.
The reason I asked is it may be something we want to try in 2024 to help with some of our projects, both collectively as boards, commissions, committees, and city council. Thank you.
Yes.
You had some question.
Was there any questions?
Yes,
Other?
I have one. First of all, I agree with you, Joe. It's just completely intuitive. I mean, it's trivial to learn. It took like no time and I kept thinking, you know, what am I missing here? Where's the complexity? But,
I
you
know,
know,
I was doing the same thing. I knew something and go.
But my question is, I tend to, my first verbal draft is 1,000 words. And if I have 30 seconds to think about it, it can be 100 words. And if I have 2 minutes to think about it, it can be 5 words. Everybody in here that knows me knows that. And so my question is, can I paste onto one of the Post-its in the Miro board system? In other words, if I type out my comments, I can edit them and then make it more useful and meaningful and more condensed for other people looking at the Miro boards. Does that make any sense? In other words, can I do it in Word and then just paste it in, or
Yes, absolutely.
You can.
because
Yes.
the Post-it, the limitation of the Post-it was you type away and then it's hard to edit your text within that Post-it.
Okay.
And I have to edit, you know, I just have to. And so I've
Yeah,
already seen,
can-
you've already seen it. I'm giving you an example just now of how I actually operate.
So yes, so try to paste your text in there. It should work.
So just do it in Word or something else, cut it and paste it, because there's no editing function that I'm missing in the.
There's a
Miro
little
system.
bit of an editing function in it.
Backspacing and stuff, but much more efficient if you
Yeah,
do it
okay.
in.
Yeah.
All right, I'll try to hybridize, but so anyway, I apologize for the lengthy posts. I finally gave up because I thought, well, I'm overwhelming these folks, so I'll try to do better.
Sounds good. Okay, so maybe one thing I wanted to check on the time. Do we have until 5 or 5:30 for the meeting today?
There's another meeting at 6 o'clock, so I would say 5:15 would be our cutoff, if you don't mind.
Okay, wonderful. Sounds good. So let me start sharing screen then. All right, so here we are in the Miro board, and before I zoom in today's session, I wanted to share with you that the way that we're gonna be documenting our sessions is gonna be in the following way. So here are all the notes and your work from the November 21st meeting. And as you can see, I actually went ahead and I logged this board. So we recorded everything and all your comments here, and they will be logged. So for future reference, if anybody wants to go back and see what we were talking at the time, the comments that we received, everything will be left there. So what I did is I copied the entirety of the board and I made a duplicate down here and I added today's date. So with here, there is gonna be a lot of progress, and I read every single one of your comments. I already made some changes based on your feedback. There are a couple of things that came up that are still as questions, but as you can see, this is sort of like what we were imagining would be a good workflow to keep a record of our conversation, and as we move forward, kind of like have a developing or working draft that moves down and advances with our progress. Does that seem like a good idea? All right. So before I move into talking a little bit about the content of today, I wanted to let me see why is this one locked too? Well, this one should be open. Okay. Yeah. So one regarding the question about typing, one possibility is there is a text tool. So one could just write text like one would, and then one possibility is also to say control, select all the text and then do a copy, and then have a sticky and then paste it on the sticky. So, if there is more comfort on typing here, that's one possibility, but also absolutely you can go outside, type all your notes in Word, and then bring it, do a copy paste as needed, to the document here. But there is another feature with text here. And the reason why I also wanted to mention this text feature is because it is my assumption that as we start developing all these texts, there will be more lengthy conversations or ideas. And as you can see here on this column, we are already starting to see a lot of text, and it's not practical to do this on a sticky note format. Because there are limitations on the sticky note. The sticky note is more like a short comment, some idea, something that we want to highlight. If we really need to develop a thought, it's much better to do it in a paragraph format. So, we can start to see those differences there.
And how did we get to that paragraph format? That looked like different from a sticky, but I don't know how.
Yeah, so it's this tool here, the text tool.
A little T.
Oh, so the text tool,
You
okay.
can just keep.
So you can keep going.
You
And
keep going.
You have to
Yeah,
like
you
carry
kinda
return, or does it stretch?
See how
across?
she's dragging a box to size it? You see the blue box?
Okay,
with
so you can
the-
make it as big a box, and then it will truncate the sentences to keep them inside the box. Okay, great. Yeah, that's probably all I.
You can shape it in any way. There can be bullets and so forth. So that's the text tool.
Okay. Thank
Yeah. So, okay. The agenda for today, and just before we also jump in, a little update on schedule. Our last meeting was back in November 21st. Here we are on December 12th. Our next meeting is going to be early January. And so just in terms of today, what we'd like to cover is the topic assignments. So thank you for sharing your thoughts on which areas you would like to be more engaged with, at least to start. And then also maybe start covering some of the content on each of those subsections, because the goal would be that after today, we will let you sort of like start taking more leadership in each of your areas to begin to develop some of the content. One thing that, I think that in reading, particularly when I was reading these notes, and just in general, I think that, and maybe something that we want to take a minute to discuss together, but it's like really thinking about who our audience is for this document. We know that as we are developing it, we are, creating our general sections. We will have a residential, not a resident, a community member portal. And then we're also intending to have this review of the commercial and developer portal. But in general, I think that is very important to keep in mind, that we want to have a website that is very engaging, that is easy to be accessed. And so for those reasons, there are some recommendations I put up here regarding how to engage, like in social media or even newspapers, the way that, the reading level that the text that we want to put And, it's a common sort of like practice for something that is gonna go to the general public to be writing at 11th grade reading level. And so I think that in general, as we each take our own roles, it's good to also keep in mind some things that are gonna bring this whole text and together. So keep that in mind, and it's something that we can also discuss. I'd like to open it up for discussion, but it's a combination of the reading level and also how lengthy or concise do we want to be with some of these ideas. Are there any initial thoughts on that regard?
Well,
Yeah, just one question on my end for the 11th grade reading level. Is that for the public interface, the residential aspect, or the entirety of the document? For me, avoiding technical jargon and say like the tree stand delineation section could be fairly difficult.
Yeah,
I think that's a really fair comment, and this is more. See, I went ahead. This is more for the portions that have this more public interface. Anything that is gonna go, of course, underneath the commercial and developer portal, and that's why this is almost like a separate section. We are not fine tuning or kind of like really editing this text. We're more providing comment here to make sure that is capturing all the latest sort of like innovations and trends in sustainability, biodiversity, and in general, the best practices for our trades. But we're not gonna be making these for the same standards, if that makes sense. But for everything else, like even this residential portal, we will have adults and all, but we want to make sure that it's very accessible, that people are not going to get caught up on, they can understand the words that we're using. We will have a glossary, of course, to clarify terms, but still, it should be pretty accessible reading. All right, thank you for the question, and please feel free to jump with other questions. Are there any other comments before we go into the outline?
I have a question. So on this is just may not matter that much, but on our colors for our sticky notes, I was noticing in the document that was presented to the city council, just to update, the colors sometimes are a little hard if it was printed, like the different blues were hard to tell which one it was, depending on the printer. And also the mayor is colorblind. So we might need at least our first name on there, or our last name, or even a number related to a person, so that it's easier for someone that's colorblind to read it.
Maria, I can comment on that. The way that document that you're referring to, Ms. Clark, this was presented to council, was prepared. The department can add that the next time we do that as an attachment. Because we kind of had to manipulate what's here to get it to that format that can go to the council 11 by 17. So I'll make a note to do that the next time as part of our work.
And we talked about once before, and maybe you're about to say it, that, because I had that exact concern. What if somebody's colorblind? So you can right click on there and hit the little person, and then it shows the author of it shows your name as the author. So she's about to show you here. So it's because she created that, it says Maria, but if you have a note and you hit the little sticky tab and then hit the person, it'll sign your name at the bottom of the note. So that way, even if it's printed in black and white, then at least we have it documented.
Let me see if I can show. So I think this was Andy's comment. So I'm gonna show author. So there it shows up. So maybe we wanna keep that feature on. In some cases, I noticed that it does say visitor.
is it
Sorry. I took your
So,
email.
You can take it all. If I did something wrong, I'm gonna say it's Joe.
Oh, no, I just followed your directions.
yeah. So I think that as you add your comments, please, if you can use the feature that says show author, that would be terrific. So we can keep that in mind. Any other question, comments before we dive in?
Yeah, I have an observation. The scale that they use to determine grade level is called the Flesch-Kincaid scale, and it is the review feature in Word. When it counts words for you, it tells you how many words, how many paragraphs, and so on and so forth. It will also tell you the readability index and the grade level. And so it will tell you if you're like, sometimes mine winds up 30, but if you're shooting for grade 11, you can paste your stuff into Word and it will tell you if you're in the right ballpark. And it's a good, useful tool for folks that don't, write constantly to kind of get a level set of what grade level they're actually producing. And it might surprise you. And then it also gives you a reading ease scale, which is like, sometimes mine is 0. It has to be like, to be at the 11th grade level, it has to be like 60 or something like that. But anyway, you can get a really good feel for how you're writing in that particular tool. So it might help some people get in line.
Wonderful, thank you. Okay, so now we're gonna start talking a little bit more in depth about the table of contents for each of the subsections. Generally, it seems that we were all in agreement with the main brackets or topic areas. We have welcome, introduction, sustainable vision for Wildwood. We have news and education, additional resources, glossary, the residential portal, the commercial portal, and then we created a tab for other, but we haven't heard anything yet. Of course, as you start developing content, if there is anything that becomes clear that it needs or deserves its own section, we can definitely continue to work on this outline and add anything as needed. Okay, so you can see the assignments. We'll put Joe in charge of the welcome paragraph. And I also did a tiny bit of reshuffling of some of the topics, just minor things. I think that originally we had this brief history maybe in the intro, but I made some changes, minor tweaks here. If you have any feedback, please feel free to jump in. Also, I will take a pause after each section to allow for, if you have a comment, to allow for conversation. The next topic is going to be the intro, and we gave it to Ms. Dagwell. So here we would like to, is where we want to start talking about the whys, like, why are we doing this work? What is meaningful about it? And really sort of like keeping it very inspirational about the challenges ahead, and how our city is really being proactive towards, addressing, and how can landscape principles or these planting principles start to address some of these concerns that we have ahead of us. Well, not just ahead of us, they are with us already. So, yes. And then we also talk about taking briefly discussing the characteristics of our city, what makes it unique, and then how that is going to influence some of the decisions that we're making. Like, some of the plant material or the, other considerations that we have in terms of soil or invasive plants and so forth, they belong to our city, and there are unique factors that either help, or promote the growth of invasive plants or are suppressing. And so that's why we want to take a little time to describe some of that and how it will reflect our decisions later on. In terms of for whom is a very broad spectrum. We of course want to sort of like take every resident, but I think it's important to really be inclusive and make sure that people feel like, this is road for them and how they are going to be able to use these guidelines. Ms. Dodwell, would you like to add anything at this point, or this is looking good on your eyes?
I think what you've got written out here, I'll just need to do some homework to get perspective from you all and from city staff on what fits into each of these subcategories under here. But the why is to preserve the city as it was originally intended. And while we want to make it welcoming to everyone, we want to make it sustainable for centuries to come. So here's the way you can go about doing that by using this tool, these resources, etc.
Some of that's been written in the watershed erosion task
it
force and
has.
some other
Mhm.
places and so forth.
Yeah, I do some research first before I start rewriting everything.
So I would say, let's see, Ms. Landoni, I like first names myself, so.
I do too.
Well, feel free to talk for.
Yeah, but it's just old habits die hard, and Mr. Bunick has been forced into that mold over the course of the last 30 years. So we try to adhere to it. But so is in the intro, our city's unique physiographic characteristics, or whatever it says behind the toolbar. That seems like the place for our place in the world, right? In other words, what I hope to contribute to this, I love the fact that you assigned me sustainable vision. I wrote you a bio so you would put me where you wanted me to fit, but that's where I fit because that's where I live. But the physiographic characteristics of our city, it's like we're in, Eastern US forest kinds of plants and so on and so forth. And so we're not the Arctic and we're not the desert. And I think, letting people know that we're a particular ecosystem or ecosystems, but and that's what we're focusing on, but we can't ignore the reality that we're part of the world. And because what I'd like to see come out of this, it's got to be hidden, is an environmental message that's truly global in nature. Just get residents thinking in those terms, if that's feasible, or if that makes any sense at all. What do you think?
I'm thinking I'm following you to some extent in that you want to make sure that when we introduce people to this, that we look at the microcosm of the city of Wildwood and the concerns we have about preserving it and how that relates to the overall environment throughout the United States, throughout the world.
Exactly. And I think that belongs in the intro because that's a powerful message. And that's a message that I personally feel strongly that we ought to deliver, but I don't know where else to do it in this guide. And so it's in your bailiwick, and that's kind of the point I was hoping to make.
Yeah, and just also in terms of process, I think that the reason why it's very important to have a lead person for each topic is so we have a very tight schedule, and we're gonna need to be really pacing ourselves to produce content and to just move ideas forward. However, we will all should have an instance of commenting and giving feedback and ideas and helping towards creating a better document. So by all means, I think that Ms. Dadwell is leading this, by others absolutely contribute. And I added here a sticky note that if there are good ideas of where we can pull some of this information from, please others then start adding your sticky notes with, where have you read about these ideas? Where can you, Ms. Outwell, find inspiration to write this section?
Yeah, if you've got particular comments, if you've got particular insights, if you've got particular things that you want this overall project to
Yeah,
come
yeah,
back,
and that.
then
and
throw
that-
that in on the comments here, and then I'll figure out how to wordsmith it.
And I think that goes for everybody.
Every section, yeah.
Just because we assigned a certain category to somebody doesn't mean that somebody else has a really strong strength in one of those and can help, just offer to give advice or give information.
Sure. Make no mistake, I wasn't complaining that I didn't get to control that little slice of heaven as well. It's just that, the sustainable vision for our particular type of tree canopy and so on and so forth has to come naturally from the broader perspective, which is, like, for example, we're in a transition zone. The southern half of Missouri was nothing but shortleaf pine forest a few hundred years ago. And the north half was prairie, north of the, it was that's where the.
Now it's just fields of crops.
Right, and so people need to understand that, we're part of a larger ecosystem, and the one of the rationales is because the species mix. I'm kind of over it has to be native to the Missouri local St. Louis area or even Missouri. It has to be Eastern US type of species because they're just blending. Climate change is making them blend even more.
Yep,
rapidly.
they're on the move.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And I think that it's important for us to keep in mind that we don't have to write all that stuff down, that we can use some, like, it reminded me of this video that I saw once of a video where it just started on the nucleus of a cell, and then it moved backwards
Yeah.
until you could see, from
What the whole
the
thing
whole
is.
universe. So if you started with a video sort of like that just showed this whole thing, it puts in people's minds that it's about the whole thing. We don't have to, they don't have to read and read and read.
Or start out with that the blue marble, the famous, Apollo photograph of the Earth, and just zoom on down and like Google Earth does. Zoom, I mean,
Yeah.
you're.
But at the same time, I think that being hyper local, it has merits. So striking that balance between really, kind of like, and again, being concise. One of the reasons why we were tasked with reviewing these documents is because we had a very lengthy document that was not really addressing. So let's always, at the end of the day, try to kind of like inspire, but at the same time, stay very focused and action oriented with these document. So moving to the sustainable vision for Wildwood, I listed all the elements that we had discussed before. Ms. Rombard, you're gonna have a challenge of like how to capture, because these are all big concepts. So how do we capture the essence of these while at the same time, remaining very accessible to our community? I think that these might be one of the trickiest sections.
I'm on it. It name's Rambo, by the way.
Rambo.
Yeah.
Sure.
Well, I think part of my concern for this is, I agree wholeheartedly with what you had said, Maria. We don't want to get too verbose or people are just going to shut down stuff. When we get over into some of the more detailed minutia, such as the resident planting guide or the commercial developer portal, we need to be able to set up search engines that can go find what they're looking for. But, and so those can be a little bit more verbose. But if we're trying to teach residents or somebody that's coming into the community what we want them to do, then I think it needs to be pretty concise and to the point in some of these earlier.
Yeah.
stages.
And I fully support that statement. And I would say that maybe with some of these ideas, they could also have hyperlinks that if somebody really wants to understand what are we talking about when we're talking about, carbon sequestration, that maybe there are links that go to a more extensive explanation.
That's a good idea, Maria, and that, if you're writing a sentence that says, we are concerned about carbon sequestration and methods that we can use as a community to ensure that we reduce the carbon. And on carbon sequestration, you have a link that takes you to a definition or a whole nother article about this is the general basics of what that means.
Yeah, and that can all be ours, plus other resources, just the best of the best. I agree. I agree with that.
Mr. Ramban, I think that actually the most interesting challenge for your section would be to really it's almost like how can we create a bridge between science and a resident, like as you were just expressing, like, we have the Marvel view, which is the science view of systems and the earth. And then we have the individual. Now, this document is for the individual, for our residents. So how do we bring all of these really broad or, huge ideas down to the ground? And to me, it comes down to quantification. How can we quantify? What does it mean, urban resiliency for Wildwood? How can we quantify that? Same with urban forestry. Where are we standing now? Where would we want to be? What is the percentage of canopy cover? Like many cities right now, their goal is to achieve a 30% canopy cover. So I am curious, where is Wildwood in that regard? And what is a realistic 5-year goal, 10-year goal, 15-year goal, and so forth? So I personally think it would be really innovative and interesting, rather than just staying on the terms. It's like, how does it happen?
So we're already drilling in further than you probably wanted to, but what I will say is we will have to show it graphically, because town center will never achieve a 30% canopy cover. But we have 12 square miles of parks in our 66 square mile area, and a lot of those are 95% canopy cover. There's not even any clearings in those forests. And so it will depend on where we look. And I think it'd be most useful if we separated it out in some useful way. But go ahead.
Does the city have GIS? Do you have that?
That's what I was
Yep,
gonna say. I
yep.
bring that for the intro as well. Like maybe I can find like a soils map, we definitely have like topography, and I feel like that's a huge thing in Wildwood. And I think that would be helpful when trying to, better explain our uniqueness and our unique environment. And I'll see what kind of layers I can find and maybe create an interactive map that has all kinds of, so if you have suggestions on layers that you think might be helpful for this, then a lot of them are available free, and I should be able to work some magic there, or find websites that, like floodplain, like FEMA has a FEMA map that's interactive that people can look up their address and see. I feel like if we had links to existing things as well, that would be, so I was actually making notes to myself to look into what exists already and what I could create.
Soil maps will be great, but they're less useful as you focus in, like somebody's yard. They're just a general guide. Here's what you find in this area, but you won't find it in your yard typically if you're looking for it. But and the tree canopy is going to be similarly problematic. Andy will tell you that you can't look at a satellite and tell what the tree canopy cover is.
Sure.
You have to, there's a whole scientific assessment involved. We may not want to do that. So the best we can probably do is say, this area doesn't have a lot of canopy and this one does.
That's what I was trying to figure out. And Maria, you may know this as well, or I might have to go do a little bit of research, but I think that's how the cities use GIS to roughly show their tree canopy in order to get to that goal of 30%. but I don't know at how much variance is there, like how in depth do they get? Not 100% sure on.
Well, a more suburban or an urban area, and Andy could probably speak to this better than I can, but you can see the individual trees. Here's the streets, it's a hard surface. Here's a roof, it's a hard surface. Here are the trees, that's your canopy. In our area, it's different because underneath the trees are grass and shrubs and so on and so forth. Those grass and shrubs don't count against the tree canopy, but they look green from the satellite. You with me?
Mhm.
So, yeah, so it's tricky.
Mhm.
Andy, do you have any thoughts on that?
Yeah,
Or is-
urban tree canopy assessments, UTCs, it's a newer technology that uses GIS and remote sensing. I'm gonna reach out to a contact I have with Forest Relief of Missouri, because they did a rough one of St. Louis County. I'm gonna see what data I can pull from there. And if anyone's interested in seeing like a very technical side of that, my former job, I did one for Beyond Housing, the 24-1 initiative up in North County. We did a urban tree canopy assessment there. And all of that's available online. There's interactive maps, a technical report, a community report, all available online. And I'll embed something in Miro here so you guys can see what that looks like. When you really get into the weeds with the UTCs, they get quite costly.
Yeah, that's what I was gonna say.
Yeah,
I can guarantee you Wildwoods exceed 30% as a whole. Like you said, city center may not be, but collectively your whole delineated city is probably well over 30.
Yeah,
Let
I'm
me
not
shoot.
sure
I
how
might be able to
useful
find out specifics for you, actually.
That'd be
would
great.
that'd be
And
great.
also just thinking about this, I know when you all contacted us, you said, we want to be proactive.
Mhm.
We wanted to, so maybe if most cities are wanting 30%, you guys are gonna aim for 50%, something like that. I wouldn't, don't take our 30% as that's the, so
Mhm.
maybe you're gonna up it a little bit. I don't know about 50, but you know.
I'm not sold on the utility of the canopy cover for Wildwood just because of we're a unique city. We got forests. And so it might not be that useful for us, but I'm eager to see Andy's documentation and maybe we'll figure it out from there, I guess.
Here being somewhat less in depth than what you are on forestry. Like a lot. Why wouldn't we want to promote the fact that we have forested areas within the city of Wildwood?
Yeah, you're right. I agree.
Okay, because you said no, you.
No, I completely agree. I'm
Okay,
just saying
I must have misunderstood.
quantification of the city's 66 square miles in terms of the percentage of tree canopy won't be that useful to us in our messaging. Because we have tons and tons of tree canopy, but there's areas that are lacking, particularly the subdivisions and so on and so forth. I'm just throwing it out. We're way too deep in the conversation.
Well, but I want to make sure that in what we put together, we identify the fact that we want to preserve said tree canopy as much as possible. We don't want to go from, if we're at 40% and see ourselves in 30, 40, 50 years down to 20% throughout the city. So I'm trying to think of some way we can measure to ensure that we stay on target.
So it's not either or. Tree canopy is not necessarily the ultimate. There, meadows and so forth are critical habitat, and they're beautiful as well.
Okay.
And so forth,
That's a
right?
good-
And
yeah,
so
that's a good point, yeah.
it's not an industrial parking lot versus a beautiful woodland. And so the percentage is not as useful in some cases as it is in others. That's all I'm saying.
Okay.
And we'll figure that out, but
Okay.
I agree with everything you said.
Okay.
I guess I have to agree with what Maria was saying about this with the quantification of, even if it's not tree canopy or meadows, we can, it's a measurement, so we can track it over time to see how we are changing, and if we're changing in a good way or if we're changing in a bad way.
Sure, I agree with that, but if we take, yeah, I don't disagree with that. You're right.
All right, wonderful. I think that everybody's on board. I understand some of, it needs to be adapted to this city and what it makes sense. So yes, it is, it's not easy. It's not an easy task. I think that, in my mind, that could be one of the most innovative and interesting aspects, but it can also be, it will take some process.
You're saying how we measure things, that's the innovation that you're mentioning? Yeah.
Yes.
And that's right up Teresa's alley, so.
Well, and also, maybe I'm thinking about this too much, but like when we're speaking to the residents, we could also give them an example just down to like the lot example. So while you're saying, speaking as a city as a whole, we're also talking to them about thinking about their lot and how they can do it. So maybe we're saying 30% of your lot should be tree canopy or impervious surface, or, all these different quantitative ways to help them to understand those. Like, and you were talking about the soil, and the soil map's not gonna necessarily help them, but you might give them a link on how they could test their own soil. That's a very easy thing for somebody to do.
Send it to Missouri Extension, but we struggle already with impervious, the topographies of various types. And so that's a key piece of Wildwood's puzzle, is how much of your lot is impervious surfaces and how can you improve that? Because tree canopy is not the be all and end all, and I love trees as much as anybody. Meadows are critical and those kinds of things, and people can say, well, I don't have any big trees, I can plant a couple of small ones, but I can restore a 1/4 acre with meadow flowers and grasses and so on and so forth, and be making a huge contribution. And it won't count as part of our tree canopy, right? Because it's not trees. And so we could be reducing our tree canopy, but still be having very useful, environmental benefits from the cleared land.
Correct. So I was just saying that there's many other things like meadow that they could quantify. So, and so instead of, we could talk as a city whole, but then, as a resident, I'm reading it, I wanna then picture my own lot and then how I can start at my level to help.
I'm really excited about this. I'm sorry, I'm talking.
That's okay.
Well, and perhaps
She's gonna start counting down soon.
Yeah, she is should be a railroad conductor.
My next life, that's gonna be my job.
Well, then, what I'm gonna do in the intro part of it, when we're working on that, is I think we need to clearly define the different, what types of topography are in Wildwood, and what types of, what's the difference between a meadow and a forest? Can a meadow grow on 3 acres only, or can it grow on 100 square feet? Those kinds of things, so that we let the residents know that there are possibilities with their small little piece of Wildwood.
I think capturing all that stuff and then figuring out where it fits is probably the right approach.
Yeah.
Yeah, I agree. I think that, yes, have that thought exactly, and then we can see, does it belong in the intro, or, do we need to add one section where, we get more in detail? So let's continue developing these ideas, and we'll find the right location for them. All right, moving on. The next section that we have is news and education, and Ms. Clark is assigned to lead this section. We heard from you, Ms. Clark, that children education is a very important aspect, and we had initially put it as one of the visions. I think that is still a vision, but in general, this whole site is ultimately an educational tool. So I do think that it's almost like there is a really rich element that it could be developed there, not just in the short term, but over time, as we identify maybe activities or classes, and how can we be in this area particularly very accessible to our community and very engaging.
I agree. I just have been looking a little bit online to find out, what books are available, what websites are available. Can we start some kind of a mini library section even for residents and children and even developers to come in and find maybe some books that are too expensive to ask them to just go out and buy for their landscaping in their home. But if we had something like that, just what are the different, and I'm just brainstorming through what are the different ways, the classes that are available through the community college, through online, through FEMA, the free ones from FEMA, there's just so many resources that we can include in this, but to put it all down and brainstorm it all, and then to make it more concise.
Yes, wonderful. All right, and the only thing that I was just thinking, there are also some, maybe you were thinking of those online resources like iNaturalist. I think it's a very engaging app that it would be fantastic to get kids very engaged with that. And it's about quantifying biodiversity in our cities. And it's very accessible just with a phone, with any iPhone. Kids can start to map out what is, learn about species and map out and so forth. So we can also
use that?
Yes.
Yep.
You should try.
I've
I'm
children onto it.
naturalist.
Yeah, I turned a 7-year-old boy onto it the other day, and his dad said he's bugging the hell out of him to use his phone because they take walks every night. What's that bug? What's that leaf? So on and so forth. So it's very gratifying. It's a wonderful tool. I'm happy to hear it mentioned. There's another version called Seek.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's great. You guys should check it out.
And then we move into additional resources. Thank you, Andy, for really populating this area with a lot of great information. I think that maybe in this section, what I was imagining is maybe adding a brief paragraph of, how or why they would go to each of these. So we have a lot of information on trees, and based on the other conversations, I think that maybe talking about plants, native plants, invasives, and so forth, and maybe this list will keep on growing as we find more resources, but I think that's a really good start.
Great.
Good job, Andy.
And have all this in one
Oh,
spot.
thank you.
Well,
And I'll certainly get some paragraphs in for each. And as we're sitting here, I'm thinking of more, but I'll embed some of that info in there.
So we have a glossary, and as I was laying out this information for the commercial and developer portal, I noticed that there is a little bit of terms and descriptions already there. So I don't know, I just added an arrow. It could be that that's a starting place, or maybe not. Maybe the words that go into our glossary are not necessarily all of these, so, but there is a starting point there.
Now, do you want us to edit in this document and add more terms in this format, or did we want to do that some other way? Are we going to do all of our work through Miro?
I am
Or a
open.
Google Doc that can be
Exactly.
shared? Okay.
I think that the best would be, as we start to develop these sections, what I thought is I would copy this outline and start creating Google documents where you know, we can share, we can decide how we want to share, if it's to the whole group or there is a person that, you know, is the admin and then maybe one or two other people. So we can decide that, but it seems that everybody is naturally revolving to, or, you know, leaning towards moving some of this content to a Word file and then bringing it into like the same way that I did here. I mean, this is a lot of text and I just copy and paste here so we can comment, but you know, the initial development to take it into a Word file.
And Ms. Landoni, if I could, Mr. Berg, I would also ask that you check the definitions that are already in place. I did my best to replicate what you provided as part of an initial assessment, but certainly I'd like you to take another look.
Oh, absolutely will do.
Thank you.
Caliper and DBH are not the same thing.
Yeah, so I would see the glossary as being, we should grab 2 or 3 or 4 huge glossaries that already exist, throw them into one document, sort them, and then see what pops out, and then condense it down, you know, from there, and, you know, change the verbiage and whatnot. But that's a big compendium of information, and I'm wondering if you can link to something like that off of this Miro board, so we can just, you know, look at the glossary and see if a word is already in there or a term's already in there. Because I think a glossary is really handy, and we're unlimited in terms of size by, you know, we just have a search feature in the glossary and people can find whatever the heck they want in it. Am I off base there, or? I'm asking you, Maria, or
Oh,
Ms. Landoni.
I think that my answer to that will be that we will, as we start developing, we will find a good middle ground between, you know, something that is not everything, but it has the key terminology to communicate with our residents. That would be my answer to that. But I think that it's a natural, you know, we'll get there.
I kind of like that idea too of potentially putting the Google Docs links right here. So we're still all organized on Miro, but then you click on it when you want to get to your category or somebody else's category if you want to make a note or something, but maybe the notes should stay on Miro. But then the document that you're editing has a link on here.
Well, the glossary specifically, it can't be too big. I mean, we're not using the full power of the internet. If we decide to winnow down the number of terms in our glossary, because the storage is virtually unlimited, and if we're going to just search on a term, why not be able to find all the terms in our glossary, unless the idea is that people can find them on the internet just by Googling them. Is that what we're thinking?
I mean, that's kind of what I would say is we don't want to.
Because that's not a
We want
print
to
document.
focus our time though on key areas. And so if it's something somebody could quickly just search, what does DBH of tree mean? Then they could use Google to do that.
I'm with Rob. I think making the glossary as all-inclusive as possible, because just reading, I try to read our manual, our current manual, and try to take out what do I know? You know, I just am a person that doesn't know anything about, and I don't know a whole lot about landscaping, but if I did, and there's quite a few terms that if I had a glossary and I was that person, I could just flip over to that and look quickly. I didn't have to go online and then see like 15 different places to look for what is it, and maybe it's not pertaining to what I want. But if it's just in the glossary, and I have another question about that, how much of this can we take and copy and paste into our document from other documents? Do we need
You wouldn't
to
wanna-
cite everything, or do we?
We change the verbiage because it's a definition, so it's gonna be generic.
You
That'd be
would,
my
Yeah, but-
opinion.
Yeah,
you
Okay, you
would
wanna hear
not
what you-
want to, we do not have someone on staff who can spend every day verifying whether or not what we currently have in the glossary is referring to the source that you originally picked for it,
Well,
And now that source is gone and
I'm not asking for somebody to do that, but to just cite it and not just the glossary, but all the things that we're doing and putting together. And we are taking from other places and making our paragraphs because we are not, most of us, except for Rob, are not experts in this, so we have to write this. And some of the things that we write may be taken from something else to make our paragraphs. And should we have a cited page, a bibliography, so to speak, at the end of this document that says, you know, we used these. I mean, I'm thinking like an English teacher, I guess. You know, my daughter, she said that, you know, she's got all these kids that are plagiarizing and she just gives them 0 when they do. And I'm thinking, do we need to do that to have a cited page at the end that shows our?
So my thoughts just on the glossary is, I mean, I feel like doing a glossary before the document, like usually the document comes first and the
Sure, of
glossary is
course.
to like, you know, define the words that you're using. And so my thoughts are while we're writing this, like, you know, maybe in the Google document or whatever, underline, highlight, do something to the word, you know, so that that could be included in the glossary. And maybe we could even include a link to the glossary from that word,
Do a hyperlink.
you know, so
I
that
mean,
people
that's-
could go from one to the other easily and find out what a, you know, caliper inch is, you know, and that way we're, you know, but you have to be careful using definitions because those create some kind of legal, you know, recourse. And if they're not correct or consistent with our like city code, that can be problematic.
That's the crux of the issue because the Tree Preservation and Restoration Code enables us to apply this new document as a subset of it, so to speak. And so the glossary actually contains terms that are part of the regulations. So bringing in somebody else's definition or multiple definitions creates obviously a lot of interpretation and potential problems relative to enforcement. So I guess what I'm saying is whatever list of terms we have in our glossary need to be consistent with the document, the regulations that depend on it. And so I think we need to be cautious about collecting all of these different terms and then trying to basically say they're part of our glossary.
So I wasn't suggesting that. What I was suggesting is all the terms are there and then we verify the definitions, that the definitions are the ones that work for us. And so if we go through the code, every term ought to be verified because we don't have a glossary in the code as I understand it. And so we would need to, we need to create, do we? Okay, so that's where we start. Right? We drop it
So
in.
I'm gonna take a minute here. We only have 10 minutes. So I think that clearly the glossary is something where we'll need to just come back and refine and come to an agreement together. We're just beginning. So I think that for now, what I think it was Ms. Repetto mentioned, the most important is to start collecting the words that we think are candidates for that glossary. This might be separate, you know, completely separate what goes for the developer portal than what comes underneath this glossary. It could be that they're separate concepts. So for now, let's just highlight and start having a running list of the terms, and we'll continue to figure out exactly what is the best way to represent it in a way that addresses all the considerations that we just discussed.
And Melanie, maybe if you could provide us with, or at least Teresa, since she's under this category, with the current glossary of terms that we have.
Yeah, she pulled the definitions and they're already in the Miro document
Okay.
over here. And so those
Okay.
are there and I'll look
I
through.
didn't know if those were all of them or not.
Right, that's what I was gonna say. I'll look through and see if there are any other sections that do have definitions, because we want them consistent, not only with each other, you know, and if we find a problem with the definition, then we can change it in the code as well, but we definitely want them to line up. Yeah.
Okay, I think that seems like a good approach. So moving into the residential portal, thank you, Travis and Melanie, for volunteering for this area. As you can see, the outline here, pretty much it was based or took a lot of the ideas that we had in our original, or we have in our original version of the sustainability landscape principles, or so some minor tweaks. One thing that you know, in general is gonna be also about really condensing the information, making it much more user-friendly, to the point. So we are pulling out a lot of these big ideas and you know, kind of like our values and vision out of this area. Those are gonna be located, as we discussed before, sort of like in the introduction or to our website. So once the resident gets here, is much more about how can they implement this, you know, how like boots on the ground. And one thing that did come up last time, and I do think is a very valid point, is, you know, the lot size and how that influences the guidelines. So I think that it seems to me that it's a new nuance that we're adding to this document, is really starting to look at how the lot size. And I do think that there might be a relationship based on the conversation today between the quantification and, you know, we were talking about like, it's not the same if it's a 6,000 square feet lot than it is acres. So I do think that at the end of the day, there might be also some relationship between quantification and the lot size and, you know, improvements there. So you know, I believe that because this is maybe a little bit different than what we had before, that it might require some proactive approach on what is the best way to address that. And just briefly going through, so there is the intro and, you know, maybe yard ethics, you know, things that we want folks to keep in mind as they are thinking of the gardens and, you know, lots. Then we move into planning and design. We talk about this lot size, and I put zoning. I don't know if that's exactly the term, but yeah, just, you know, how, you know, the size of the lot really influences how the land use and the zoning. Then the development plan might, you know, indicate or give directions in terms of creating an existing conditions plan, and then start to think about the elements that they're going to bring into their design. And there was a lot of information in the old guide about, you know, both of these. Then we could cover a little bit, you know, like soil and amendments, or how to improve the conditions on that regard, thinking of hydrozones, irrigation, plant material. There is a lot of information about plant material in our initial guide. And I think we have a lot of potential to really cut and use our external resources here. And then briefly, maybe maintenance, additional resources. And here we had a listed glossary, but you know, maybe it's just as simple as having a link to what we develop out here.
Yeah.
Any feedback?
Yeah, a couple comments. What we're missing in the planning's guide, it may go elsewhere in this document. I really don't know about this, but the biggest problem that a lot of folks have is the pre-existing environment. This seems to contemplate a green, quote unquote, greenfield sort of environment. You're going to go in and you're going to figure out what kind of soil you have, and you're going to make a design and you're going to plant it. Well, what about if you got nothing but fescue and Serratia lespedeza in a particular yard, and you want to replace it with bluegrass? You got to figure out how to do that. And I would like, personally, I'd like to see us do it with the minimal amount of chemicals and just minimally invasive generally. And that's a tough nut to crack. And we gotta figure out how to crack it in here if we're gonna be an example city rather than just kind of following along. The first thing you do when you restore a meadow sometimes is spray a bunch of glyphosate and kill everything and then start over. And there's modifications to that approach, but that work well in residential plannings, but we gotta consider where that goes in this document. Is that a sensible observation? Or are we just gonna ignore that?
No, I think it's important. I mean, because you're right. I have a ton of Sericea lespedeza on the property and
You ain't
It's
gonna get
like-
rid of it easily.
no, and
Yeah.
so we probably need to help people that are in that situation understand before you can go ahead and start planting all these things we're recommending, you might need some strict removal.
Yeah, it's so nuanced, like, this is, Sericea is a broadleaf. Do you use a broadleaf herbicide and kill whatever butterfly weed you have and whatever, and then let the fescue grow up, and then 3 years after it takes several years to kill Sericea, just I'm cluing you in.
Oh,
After
I
that,
know.
then you gotta do a grass herbicide. And it's all these chemicals, and I don't know any better way to do it, but that needs to be discussed and explained.
What I am curious, Mr. Rumbau, is are you talking, what size lot are we talking about a suburban? Are we talking about town center, or are we talking?
I wasn't, I
urban?
was just broaching the topic as a concept. We need to figure out how to address that in this document because this is the right place for it, but we haven't talked about it much. So I was just throwing it on the table. I'm not suggesting that a 6,000 square foot lot, I wasn't talking about any particular size of lot.
But just not a particular size lot, but if you're what are your existing conditions? And then that affects where you're going to start in this process.
Yeah, but then how do you manage that existing condition if it's not bare dirt?
If you're aware of any good links to sites that,
Oh, I wish.
right, I was gonna say, I feel like that's an ideal place to have links to better resources than us who are not experts in this, and so, yeah, we'll look into see if we can.
Well, a lot of them though, Melanie, and this is not off topic, but a lot of the sites will say, here's the herbicide that you use.
Oh, yeah.
Or you will use this herbicide for, there's one called sedge hammer and it's supposed to kill sedges. Well, it kills every other damn thing, but it's advertised as killing sedges. And if people put that on without being aware of it, judicious
The
application is
Missouri
key.
Department of Conservation, I just pulled up, has a Sericea lespedeza control page that gives you control recommendations using prescribed burning, mechanical control practices, chemical control.
Grazing, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah,
And, it doesn't tell you what's gonna work though.
Well, no.
But doesn't that just bring like the broad question that there are things like this that we need to address? And so putting that in as, how do we get back to go? How do we get back to go to start with whatever you want to do in your landscaping? So that's the broad category. And then
Yeah,
it could be the grasses, it could be whatever that, getting rid of the honeysuckle.
Yeah.
You can have, but in my mind, when I'm thinking about reading it, if it's got a lot of words, and I'm dyslexic, so a lot of words give me a lot of trouble. So putting it in more of a flow chart where you've got this problem. Now, what do you do? And do I get to hear and if this is fixed, I go yes. If it doesn't, I go no. And different directions, just as a flow chart, looking at it
Like
instead of
that.
reading paragraphs.
That's a great idea.
Really is.
I fully agree. I think that's a really nice approach. It's almost like, again, directing people in the right direction rather than trying to cover. Is too complex. How to use these chemicals that in many cases can cause cancer in a safe manner. So it is really tricky. So I think that's a very good suggestion in terms of like if these are your existing conditions, these are the resources. And also, you know, in talking with some people that are really involved with conservation, what they suggested is that, you know, for non-urban over 10-acre sites, the Missouri Department of Conservation has employees per county that can come and, you know, really work with homeowners. So that's why I was also asking about what size lot are we talking about, because we can point them in much more robust hands if they're really working with a large tract of land.
So they have the private land conservationists, but they also have like suburban, suburban resources, and I forget what they're called, but they will come help you manage literally 100 square foot lot of a butterfly garden or something like that. And so that fits in Teresa's flow chart. If you got these problems, call these people. But the trouble is, there's only one for all of St. Louis County, as far as I know, maybe two, that do that small of a focus. And so we might be referring people to a resource that can't get to them for 6 months. So we'll have to figure out how that all works.
Thank you. So that brings us to the end. This section here I put as a reference, so everyone is aware that, you know, we're also going to be reviewing the commercial and developer portal with these sections that are listed here. So this will be just, you know, reviewing for add any you know, additional ideas that we think are important or might be missing. So that would be in coordination with Joe and Andy. So I also included their names here. And that brings us to the end. You know, again, we're gonna be meeting, and sorry, one more thing. Andy, I also included the tree manual down here. I know you were asking, you know, how can we review these? So I put all the pages. And I think that one way that we could do this review would be just to add a comment here, you know, and then once you hit click, it just keeps the comment a link to a certain area.
I'm not sure I followed that. Do you know how to do
You
that?
wanna show us again, please?
How is that distinct from a sticky?
It's just a different format. You know, I think that the sticky maybe gives you more like, you know, just this visual, like on the comments, you have to click on it to see the comments.
So where do you get, so it's a different toolbar? I'm trying to figure
It's
out how to
under-
navigate
I
there.
think it's underneath.
here.
It's
It's right
underneath
here.
the Zoom thing.
Yeah.
Like
Right,
it pops
right.
up underneath the Zoom thing when we were looking. Okay, so hit comment, okay, and then click, and then you're gonna click somewhere.
And
and you
okay,
can
oh,
add
yeah,
a comment.
Mhm.
You can mention somebody if you wanna call them out, like Christy, make sure you pay attention to this.
okay, and what's that face there? What's that little face there? That little round
This
thing?
is if you wanna be
Oh, I see. Oh, okay, so it's
It's like on your.
yeah, wow, okay, all right.
They were putting emojis on everything.
These are getting dumber and dumber.
Here's the question I've got, because I've got my iPad with me. And I've got this up, but I have I'm on view only. And
She
do we ever
has it
come up with
locked.
passwords for us to get logged in?
Have you been able to edit in the past?
Well, I was at home when you asked us to say what categories do we want to be involved in, so I got in just fine, but then I pulled it up when I got here and I've got view only.
Were you on your?
Yes.
Or
No, this is correct. I just to clarify, while I was working, I was editing everything over the weekend. So I put a temporary lock, but I'm gonna go ahead right
Okay.
after this call and I'm gonna make it back available for everyone to comment in this section down here. This section, we're gonna keep it locked, but the one that has today's date here, December 12th, that's gonna be
Okay.
available for comment.
Will
Okay.
will you make it very clear to us links to Google Docs or whatever the heck you're gonna use, right on the page, so we'll know this is where you stick this information, kind of thing, or are we gonna work that out later?
Let me see, I thought maybe I would send it, but let me figure it out if it's better just to put, as you are suggesting, a link directly here. I think that would be a nice idea if we can do it that way. Yeah, so that way, you know, it's all, this is kind of like our entry to all the information. So, you know, as folks start to develop content, maybe there are gonna be questions. Our contact information is still up here, emails, and so feel free to reach out with any questions. I think that's okay to, if there are questions, or questions can also be put on the board directly, and we can clarify here. If we want everybody to be aware of the conversations we're having, maybe that's a better way to communicate. Any other questions? I'm sorry.
Yes, Ms. Landoni and Ms. DeGuire. When we're adding content to the Miro board, is there any way that it notifies all of us that something's been added, so we don't have to necessarily check back? Is there like an email system, or is there and I may be asking for too much, and maybe it's just a system where you have to check occasionally to see what's being added or what's being changed?
I got a feeling we'll get 400 notifications a day once we get cranking though.
I don't know the answer to that, so we'll have to look into it.
Thank you.
So is there that I had a question when you asked that. Is there a facility within this to reach out directly to yourselves or to others and so on and so forth? Because email is cumbersome, we don't, you know, phones, yeah, I mean, text is immediate, and I'm wondering if there's a similar facility in this that says, hey, Rob has a question for Joe or for you know, whomever. Is there anything like that?
I think if you do that @ symbol, I was just checking to see, because I don't use that very
Where's the
often.
Where's-
Where she typed the @ sign, and then people's names came up.
Oh, you just
I just-
find it on the spot and type at?
Like if you're typing anything.
I will say quickly, I tried this a couple weeks ago. Only Christy and Maria can use the @ symbol. You have to invite us to become like an administrator or a part of the team, quote unquote. We're just visitors with editor access. You'll have to up our permissions a bit.
Is there anything
Okay.
wrong with doing that?
Because it said users will be notified, so that's what I was waiting for my notification. Oh, I just got a, it alerts me via a notification on my iPad.
Yeah, that's
that-
ideal. That's
yeah.
exactly what I was looking for. Okay.
But
Yeah,
let me look, let me see if that costs more money or what that. You're currently a visitor to invite you to the board or the team. So we may have to invite them to the team
Mhm.
versus a visitor. We'll look, because that would be nice, because then you would get a notification.
Yeah. And
And,
that's what Joe was looking for
Yep.
too, so.
yeah,
And if possible, if there is an additional cost, let us know, because I think it would be beneficial so we know what we're all doing. And
okay.
so that if questions answered and we're busy here and it's to Melanie, Travis, or I, it's not 5 hours later when let's look at the
Yeah.
board.
Yeah.
And you've
That's
waited 5 hours for something that could have maybe been done in 5 minutes.
Awesome.
Mhm.
well, if we're potentially looking at Miro on the cost of it, then maybe if we had an account, then, you know.
Well, they can't expect you to have this board and get the utility from it without having team members, and so I doubt if
To
it's.
kind of
for-
engage each other as they're doing work.
Yeah, it's probably some really easy thing
Yeah.
that we just don't know.
And it's free, probably free.
And that question was hopefully more succinct way than what I described in item 8 on the agenda. Identify clearinghouse for information, question, comments, and other items. So
You got the the Dr. Rambo verbosity problem sometimes. Might be the worst, but
My last question to the consultant team, if we're meeting on January 4th, is there a timeline or deadline to have our, at least the start of our content in place?
That's a very good point, and I think that yes, there should be a deadline. So we have a chance, particularly since I'll probably be trying to consolidate and make things readable. I would say
Say
that
by the 31st, so that as soon as we come back from the holiday, that we have at least 2 solid days to organize it.
yes, that to me, I think that that's a good timeline on our end. I am curious if the committee members feel like that's a good amount of time.
well, I just filed my candidacy for office. So I have to figure out my campaign. And I also have a deer management program that is sort of listing to port, if you will, that I have to straighten out, and that seems to be taking a lot of time. So I have other irons in the fire, but I'll try to meet whatever deadline you guys impose, because I'm the process.
Well, and from the department's perspective, I'm not thinking we're gonna have final content, or at least
No,
that preliminary content. I think these are just thoughts, suggestions, maybe the beginnings of some paragraph or two. But I think before we get too far along, we need our consultant team to see what we're thinking, so we're not getting too far astray.
Yeah, we need the
Yeah.
links. I need
Yeah.
links on my thing, so I can just drop everything into documents, and then that's when I start editing. So if that's the process, it works for me. I have to say, you guys have done a great job so far. This is really a good contracting experience or consulting experience. Sometimes we don't have. So,
Thank you.
I extend that to Mr. Berg as well.
yeah, that's why I said you guys.
Well, if there's nothing else, and our deadline for submittal onto the Miro board is December 31st. Sunday. So. And then our next meeting is Thursday, January 4th, 2024, at the same time, 4 o'clock. And we'll send out a reminder email tomorrow, just with the times and dates and everything. And thanks so much for being here.
I'm gonna demo iNaturalist to those folks who would like to see it. It's trivial, it'll take 2 minutes, and my phone is 20,000 pictures, and probably 5,000 are my little girlfriend neighbors. 5,000 are turtles, and the other 10,000 are leaves and trees and bugs and so forth. So it should have plenty of.
With that, yes, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Read my mind. Seconded by Ms. Bauer. All in favor? Aye. Thanks so much, and to those we won't see, happy holidays.
thank you. Happy holidays. Thank you.
Thank you.
I gotta get